Hi folks, welcome to Audience Matters. In this presentation, we'll cover the following topics. Audience, isn't my instructor my audience? Aspects to consider before writing, what you need to know, primary, secondary, and tertiary audiences, and academic versus business audiences. While different kinds of writing share common features and goals, each kind of writing is unique because it responds to and emerges from a particular situation. Each piece of writing has a purpose, an audience, and a particular context that shapes how one writes and how that writing is received by others. In this lecture, I will take you through some of the ins and outs of writing for your audience. Simply put, your audience is the person or people to whom you want to communicate. By knowing more about them, their wants, needs, values, etc., you're able to better craft your message so that they will receive it in the way you intend. The ability to appeal to your audience allows you to have influence. Knowing how to appeal to your audience will help you stay engaged with them and enable you to have impact. Who you are writing for will determine how you write your text. It is the reader who will determine the tone, formality, and content of your communication. Your success as a communicator partly depends on how well you can tailor your message to your audience. Isn't my instructor my audience? Well, though technically I am the audience who will be reading your papers, write as though you were writing to an educated audience, of course, but one that doesn't know about the prompt you're writing for, nor do they know what you are writing is an assignment for a class at all. Write as though someone from the outside Writing 213 world could pick up your paper and understand it as a standalone document without any outside explanation. Like, for example, if you're going to write about Zimdar's classifications, introduce the resource first before you start referring to it in your analysis. Yes, I know what Zimdar's classification is. Obviously, I assigned it to you. But these details are imperative to include if you want to write prose that is clear and effective. This is all to say that when students write an essay with only their instructor in mind, they might not say as much as they should say or say it as clearly as they should say it, because they assume that the person grading it knows more than they do and will fill in the gaps. But this leaves it up to the instructor to decide what you're really saying, and she might decide differently than you expect. For example, she might decide that those gaps show that you don't understand how to introduce the material. Instead of leaving your meaning up to your instructors when you write, fill in the gaps, connect the dots, make sure you are really explicating your reasoning for them. Control the narrative you're putting out, essentially. Thinking about your audience differently can improve your writing, especially in terms of how clearly you express your argument. The clearer your points are, the more likely you are to have a strong essay or any piece of writing. By treating your instructor as an intelligent but uninformed audience, you end up addressing her more effectively. So who is my audience? Things you're going to want to consider about your audience before you start writing. What are they looking for? What's important to them from this piece of writing? What do they need and or expect from the document? Are they waiting for you to schedule an appointment with them? Are they waiting for you to email them minutes? Okay, so consider what they're going to need and expect from the document. If you're emailing them attachment, is the attachment there? Where also you're going to want to consider where they expect to find the information. You'll consider how they'll use the document and their knowledge of the topic. What do you need to know about your readers? Bias. So what assumptions are they bringing with them? What do they value? Do they want to hear from you? Is the email that they're going to receive from you something they're expecting, or is it a burden? Do they have a what's in it for me mentality? And if they do, how are you going to address them so that they can hear your message? You also need to consider their skepticism. The reader might not be predisposed to believe you. They might want to disbelieve you. How do you adjust your message for this type of audience? This is an important thing to consider. You'll also want to consider how they're going to read. Are they going to read every word, every paragraph, every sentence, word for word? Are they going to skim? Maybe they'll put the piece of writing down if it loses their attention. What's going to get their attention? How are they going to read? And then finally, you're going to want to consider their needs or the use. Why do they need this piece of information? Why do they need Why do they need this piece of writing? If you don't know some of these things we just talked about, you can probably figure out bias, skepticism, what they need to know, and how they're going to use their document, how they're going to read it, even if you don't know them. Sometimes just knowing their role in an organization can sometimes tell you what you need. So take time to think critically and carefully about your readers, not only in terms of what they know and what they don't know, but also about how they'll read, what biases they may have, and what their attitude is towards you, your organization, maybe even the topic. And doing this before you write, I know it sounds like it's a lot of work, but this can actually save you time. You don't have to go back and rewrite things. Your teacher's not going to come back to you and say, this is a little informal for an academic audience, or something like that. Promise, it saves time. So let's look at an example outside of academia. If you were writing an email, let's say to a CEO of a company, maybe it's your boss. Now, for instance, we know that a CEO is probably busy. They've got a lot on their plate. They're wearing a lot of different hats. They're doing a lot of different things. This means that they're going to want to have that bottom line right up front, like right as you get going. They're going to want to know the point of the email and why you're emailing them and what you need from them. They're going to be skeptical. They're going to, which means that we're going to need to ensure that we include the right amount and kind of information for them to kind of overcome that skepticism. We can assume they're probably a skimmer. They're probably not going to go through the document word for word and read every little bit. They're probably going to read the first and last lines of every paragraph and maybe the first and last paragraphs of every document, but they're probably not going to read everything verbatim. They also might not have a deep project knowledge like an engineer that's hands-on working on the project might have. So explanation of terms might be necessary, but of course you don't need to overdo it because I'm sure that they know plenty, Knowing this information, all of these kind of qualities of a reader is enough to ensure that you write a document that's really going to meet your reader's needs. Like I mentioned before, in college, our primary and typically our only audience is our professor. Professors approach student writing similarly. They want to read what you've written and they're trying to determine if you've mastered the course content. The professor is an expert or authority on the subject matter. And likewise, at school, professors rarely share student writing with others. Students rarely target multiple audiences. But on the job, you not only target the primary readers, but you're also going to talk about secondary and tertiary readers who may or may not be known to you. So let's just look at these really quick, get a couple of definitions. So the definition for primary reader, these readers are the readers that have the most influence over the outcome of the document and are ones who will decide what the action is to be taken on the document. Secondary readers, they usually have some influence but aren't typically decision makers. Instead, these folks are tasked with completing the action the document requires. Secondary readers are tasked with completing the action the document requires. And then tertiary readers. These readers include others who may have an interest in the document's information, but they're often evaluators of you or your team or company. Think big boss, like boss's boss. They might want to see like the first email in a chain of emails to see that a project is being kicked off, but they wouldn't want to necessarily see all of the subsequent emails that just would be better just for the team. They're going to get the big updates, those tertiary readers. In the business world, for example, as an employee, you might write to many readers with varied backgrounds, some highly educated experts and some less knowledgeable than you are, presumably. You will also write to people within your department and outside your department, and perhaps even outside your organization. And these readers won't necessarily read what you've written unless you persuade them that your message is relevant and importantly, that it will help them perform their job. You have to make your message relevant, clear, and easy to read. You always need to assume that others will read your documents, that photocopies could be made, and that copies of your documents could be filed for further use. The same is true of writing in an academic setting. You always want to make sure anything that you're putting out is of the quality that if it were archived and somebody were to pick this up 5 years down the road, they would be able to understand what you're writing about, just on the merits of what's written. Audience matters. When you're in the process of writing a paper for a class, now we're back to academia, or an email to your boss when you're on the job, it can be easy to forget that you're actually writing to a person. Whether you've thought about it consciously or not, you always write to an audience. Sometimes your audience is a very generalized group of readers. Sometimes you know the individuals who compose your audience, and sometimes you write for yourself. But keeping your audience in mind while you write can help you make good decisions as a writer about what material to include and how to organize your ideas, and also how best to support your argument. Thank you, and if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. There's my email.